Hi, I'm Wendy Chadwick, and I'd like to talk to you just a minute about the importance of spelling words and explicitly and directly teaching those spelling words and spelling patterns. Directly teaching spelling enhances students' ability to understand phonemic awareness. It also helps them understand that English is mostly predictable and logical, which is super important for a kid who's already struggling, not to feel like we as teachers also have zero clue the logic around why certain patterns exist. So it will alleviate a lot of stress of reading when they can recognize a pattern. Also, it solidifies the sound grapheme connection. When writing a letter, it creates a physical connection to that letter. That also happens when if they're really young, if you're teaching K1 or preschool or kids who have cognitive issues, having like the sandpaper kind of things where they can feel it, or giving them different things to write with. So they're using like that whiteboard or that little Bodhi board thing, different ways of writing it also helps solidify that connection. One of the biggest issues as a teacher for me has been, how do I make these lists? How do I find these lists? How do I group words? If you already have a curriculum that tells you exactly what order to go in, that's really helpful. But also we need to be analyzing all of those curriculums to make sure that they're the most appropriate thing for our students. You know your student better than anyone else, and if they're ready for a spelling pattern, if they're not ready for a spelling pattern, if they need a week on the same spelling pattern or a day or 2 weeks. So you're the best judge of how quickly or slowly you need to go to make sure they've mastered that spelling pattern. When I'm working on lists with students, if they're very young, I start with CVC words. Or I always try to make sure I have a verb or a set of verbs right at the beginning so that we can start writing sentences right away. It's really important for the students to be able to see that they can create sentences too, so it's not just a big mystery when they're reading as well. In my spelling list, and again, there are many ways to do this. There's no one right way. It's so dependent on your students. But after I do CVC words, I move into CVCE words, the silent E. I teach the most common rule first, which is the silent final E makes the vowel say its own name. But there are other silent E words like in have that they need to know pretty much in kindergarten. So, and they can learn it in kindergarten, and because then it won't be confusing when they can understand the silent final E has more than one job. So then I go into other spelling rules like the floss rule and the rabbit rule, and then morphology. All those should be taught starting in kindergarten. It's really important that as soon as they realize the letter S makes it plural, that's morphology. That's understanding that one letter can change the meaning of something. So it's really helpful if those students have that understanding of morphology right away. When I give them a spelling list, we grapple with it auditorily initially because I want them to hear the different sounds. I want us to analyze the sounds. Let's think about the first sound, the last sound, the medial sound. If it's multi-syllables, how many syllables? Are those open syllables or are those closed syllables? How can we determine, what do we know about the sounds and how the syllables work? It's really important to make sure that they feel confident analyzing those words. We're making little word detectives here. After that, I have the students look at the words. Let's analyze how they look visually. Confirm that the word same started with a S sound, so it starts with an S. So what else do I notice about the pattern? We can, sometimes I have them get up and do like a gallery walk around the room. That's really fun. I also have them get into teams, and each team has to say some things that are alike and some things that are different. Again, this is a protocol that you can prep with the kids. Doing this remotely could be a little bit trickier because obviously we can't do a gallery walk and we can't do things like that. But we can set up a slide deck and through Google Meets have the slide deck going as you present it and analyze the words together, everybody on your Google Meets meeting. Then we look at patterns we know. Let's have the kids analyzing it and building confidence. Does it end with an S? What does that mean? How does that change the morphology? What's the language of origin? I start teaching language of origin in kindergarten because that makes a big difference in how things are spelled. And if we can understand, have the kids understand that, it's going to build confidence in them right from the start, which is obviously what we want. Another thing that's really helpful is to put the sounds in, instead of having a word wall, having a sound wall where you're saying this sound can be spelled these different ways. Which way, where does this go? Let's think of the word same. The A is sound is spelled with an A and the silent final E, the magic E, whatever you call it. So you would want to put that in that category for that and highlight those words. But then you could also make another card and you can use just like a card, index card, and highlight the M and the After the grapple section, I move into the write it section. And this is where kids are encoding and decoding. I like to move into that as quickly as possible because I know that when students struggle, things seem like a mystery and life can get overwhelming really fast. So when they are encoding, you would say the word same, and then you would say the letter names, SAME, and they would write it. And it's really important that they're not typing it, especially if you're working remotely, that they've got their own little notebook, a practice notebook, so they're writing that word. And then they can hold it up and show you, and then you can give them that immediate feedback because the immediate feedback is also very important. I also teach handwriting. Every single time I reiterate handwriting because I know in general ed classes, a lot of times handwriting might not even be explicitly taught in some classes in some schools. And if you're able to have a conversation with that general ed teacher and find out if they do teach handwriting, what language they use, because if we're using the same language, as you know, it helps solidify the information even more. So after we've done the grapple part, we've done the writing it part, we're going to have a little hook. So if, again, using the word same, it's not in a regular pattern. It's a very predictable regular pattern where the silent final E is making the A say its own name. But the hook is, ooh, magic E. However you do it is great. When working with irregular words, having a way to memorize those words is really helpful. I know it took me forever to spell the word friend, and my sister told me, oh, it ends with the word end, friend. So just having those little things, sometimes with my kids, especially if the language of origin is something different, I will say it with like an accent in that language of origin to help remember how to spell it. Like again, we spell A-G-A-I-N. The A-I pattern is two-letter A that we do not use at the end of English words. So I say it in a British accent, like again, would you like to do that again? That's just my silly way of doing it. Then we move into the practice section where they're practicing writing them and saying them. I have them say and write one spelling word, then the next one, then the next one, because every time you go back to the word, you're building that long-term memory. It's really awesome to just have some fun games with it, doing the analysis of those words. The last part is the testing part, and this is when you're seeing if they have mastered those skills. And so we do words and then sentence dictation testing all in the same time, and then you can see which other spelling patterns they're still remembering if you incorporate in your sentences previous spelling patterns, especially if they were difficult, like the floss rule is sometimes difficult for kids to remember. So if you incorporate those spelling patterns in the sentences, it will help solidify the information. So again, we do a grapple, we write it when you're encoding and decoding. We have a hook to help kids remember it. We also then practice and test. This is really spread out over a week. You could do a grapple on Monday, encoding on and decoding on Tuesday, Wednesday really focusing on the hook, Thursday practice, Friday test. Every school is different. You might not get to see your kids every day of the week. You might only have 2 days a week with them, in which case I would incorporate a lot of phonemic awareness practice with my spelling words. So that's a great way if you don't have access to like Heggerty curriculum or some phonemic awareness curriculum. It's easy to incorporate the grapple and phonemic awareness in the first 15-20 minutes. Then move on to encoding, so they're getting that handwriting practice and writing it. And then they can practice it, especially if you have a great relationship with the parents, they can practice it at home. Right now, if we're doing remote learning, obviously the whole thing is at home, but they can practice it on a different day. And then I always give a practice test with a whiteboard before the actual test. And that helps build confidence. And then that way they can get that immediate feedback and practice with it. I have lots of resources connected to this video, and some of them include how to find lists of spelling words that include the spelling rules and morphology. So take a look at that. And if you need to know more about why it's important to do this, I also have lots of different books, and I try to include the page numbers when I could, that's just specifically dealing with the spelling and dictation portion.